I was never very good at making intros or coming up with intro ideas on the spot. But for this game, it's something that really does deserve one, but I'm not exactly sure how well I could do it without actually prepping for it, so I'm just gonna go ahead and show it. This is Final Fantasy VI. I had already played Final Fantasy VI years ago, a long time ago, and this was that copy that I played it originally on. I never actually owned a Super Nintendo. This was my first introduction to both Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI. Was the Final Fantasy Anthology Collection, and this collection is complete in box. The discs are pretty much spotless, scratch-free. Picked up this copy brand new off the shelf and then plopped it into the console, then put it back into its little case when it was done being used. That's why everything in here is so spick and span spotless. There's barely any scratches or anything on there outside of storage wear and tear over the years. But outside of that, it's a pretty good condition. It's a pretty good copy, and I'm never going to get rid of it. Final Fantasy VI, my first introduction into it, was when I was going backwards throughout the series. I believe my very first RPG was Dragon Quest VIII. It's still my favorite JRPG. It's still probably my favorite game of all time. I'm going to probably be needing to make a series of Dragon Quest VIII praise eventually. The first Final Fantasy game that I played, though, had to be 10. Yeah, I'm sorry, I started with 10. I started branching out genre-wise in video games with the PS2. I didn't really branch out too much from platformers and Tony Hawk Pro Skater and stuff like that in the PS1 era until after picking up a PS2 and after picking up a PS3. I went back in time to the PS1 era and picked up a bunch of PS1 games, and I loved them all. So many great PS1 games, and this is one of them. This is a port, though. And it's the first time we ever got Final Fantasy V. And with the previous installation, which was Final Fantasy Chronicles, which only contained one Final Fantasy game, which is Final Fantasy IV, which we did get. It also contained Chrono Trigger, which we also did get, both on the Super Nintendo, but now for the PlayStation 1 fans, which was also my first introduction to both of those games. And also on the PlayStation 1, they had Final Fantasy 1 and 2 in a Chronicles collection. That was also the first time we got Final Fantasy 2 to play. So the PS1 version of that was my first introduction to Final Fantasy II. I would later go on to play that again on the PSP, which is the superior version of Final Fantasy II. And there are also a bunch of Game Boy Advance ports, especially of Final Fantasy VI, which they enhanced in quite a bunch of ways. But I'm going to be making the argument in saying that Final Fantasy VI on the PlayStation 1 should have had those upgrades already in the PS1 version, because this is already moving from Super Nintendo cartridges to disc-based technology with a lot more storage capabilities and a lot more power to add more data, more information. They added full-motion video openings and endings to both of these games, and that was pretty much all they did, because the rest of Final Fantasy VI is pretty much pulled directly from the Super Nintendo port. Very little dialogue was changed, very little enemy names were changed, very little weapon names were changed, spell names. It was basically the Super Nintendo experience on the PlayStation 1. And with that, to me, was a major colossal disappointment, because this was their opportunity to add the content that the Game Boy Advance version had here. They had the room to add those 4 Espers, which was Leviathan, Cactar, I believe the other one was Giant Tonberry or Tonberry King or something like that. And then there's a 4th one whose name I can't remember, but Leviathan at the very least should have been in the base game, if anything, because it sounds like it belongs in the base game. They added a bonus dungeon, which I think you could have left on the Game Boy Advance. That would have been fine. But the 4 espers, you could have easily added those in the dialogue box updates. You definitely could have fixed that. I'm going to be talking about that. This is one of those very few reviews that I'm going to be doing where I actually wrote up a series of bullet points to try to talk about as much as I could, because I knew if I didn't make a series of bullet points, there would be things I'd forget to talk about, and I'd probably go out of order and all of that stuff. I'm already going a little bit out of order. But let's try to keep it to this little word pad that I'm looking at next to this window of recording to see what I'm going to be talking about in order. I don't exactly have written descriptions, I just have a bullet point saying you need to talk about this. And the first one is core combat compared to 1 through 5. Because we're not really going to be comparing too much to 7 and onwards, though I'm going to be making one exception, which is one of the core combat's greatest cons, which is also something that previous installments also suffered from, mainly Final Fantasy II and Final Fantasy V. And that is basically the problem of being able to make every single character do everything. And I think Final Fantasy III also had this issue, but hey, I haven't played 3 yet. The first time we ever got to 3 was when they had a digital-only PSP release and the 3DS release. I never had a 3DS. I despised dual screens. I thought that was way too much information. I just wanted a single screen, so I picked up the PSP, but I didn't like downloading digital games for it. So when I was playing the PSP, I missed out on Final Fantasy III. And of course, we never actually got Final Fantasy III in these PS1 versions. We've eventually got Final Fantasy III in a pixel remaster. But again, I just haven't played it yet, so I missed out on 3. It's the only one of the mainline titles up to 13, and not including 11, which is an MMO, that I haven't played, I played a bunch of sequels, I played a bunch of spin-offs, and I played almost everything in the Final Fantasy VII universe, outside of the Remake and Rebirth, though I know the story of Remake and Rebirth, because I know all about the story of Remake and Rebirth, yada yada yada. But, I mean, one of the cons here is being able to make your characters be able to do and learn everything, and 6 kind of suffers from this, but it does mitigate it a little bit by fixing something that 5 did. In 5, there was some mitigation, but not a lot, in that every character could equip a certain class, such as Thief, Knight, Dragoon, Samurai, Black Mage, White Mage, Time Mage, etc. I'm not going to list every single one, but there are a bunch of them. You equip these by equipping a crystal to a character, and that character will then have access to certain classes. And those classes would then be mastered slowly over time. For example, mastering level 1 of a class will let you equip that special ability. For example, a Time Mage, the only ability a Time Mage has is Time Magic. And a Time Mage, by equipping that class onto a character, you could use every single Time Mage spell. However, when you master the Time Mage, each level, there are like 5 or 6 to sometimes 8 levels or tiers in each class is tiers in classes, levels, and whatever. And every time you master a level, you will gain either an ability or a second tier of spells for your bear class to equip, which is Final Fantasy V is one of those games I'm going to have to replay someday, because I also never finished Exdeath's Domain. And that's why I came back to revisit Final Fantasy VI, because I actually never finished Kefka's Tower. I stopped just outside of it, doing everything else outside of the tower, but I never actually entered the tower and finished it. So, I decided to replay Final Fantasy VI and finally finish it. But I know the core gameplay of Final Fantasy V, because I tried to master every single class before entering Exdeath's Domain, and I got burned out. I severely burned myself out on all of that grinding, because it just took so freaking long. It's so long! They mitigated it a little bit. There's a little bit of improvement from 5 in Final Fantasy VI in regards to the class special abilities. For example, in Final Fantasy V, you could equip the Samurai skill, the Samurai class, and you would have access to Guild Toss, Well, Giltos returns, but it's an equipable relic only for Setzer, so Giltos doesn't get to be used and abused by every single character this time. Another one, the Dragoon class would have access to Jump. You now need to equip a relic to either Edgar or Mog to turn them into Dragoons to allow them to use the Jump skill. And there's another relic that you can equip to them that allows them to enhance the Jump skill to an even better Jump skill. There are a lot of great things that they improved upon to make each character stand out just a little bit more. And we're going to talk about each character individually throughout this review. But I do think that that's an upgrade. The downgrade is the magic system. Everybody can learn every magic ability, and through the level up system, by equipping certain espers at a time, when you level up, you can increase everybody's magic stat so that they can increase their magic damage over time. Everybody has this ability, so if you figured out how to get Ultima, for example, and you decided, let's use the Ragnarok skill and grind Ultima on every single character, and then just grind their magic damage, magic attack, up to about 60 to 65, so that we could do 9999 max damage on pretty much every mob and kill everything very quickly. You could do that. You could do that. It would take some time, but you could do that, and give every single character every single spell, especially Ultima, which basically... Ultima bypasses the Reflect ability. If you put Reflect on a character, it usually reflects spells back at the enemy, or reflects spells off the enemy back at you. Ultima bypasses barriers, Ultima bypasses magic defense. Ultima is the ultimate spell, and Flare is also a barrier-piercing one, but it's a single target spell. But Ultima will hit everybody. It's very powerful. And it also costs a lot of magic points. However, there are things that you can collect, called like the Gold Needle, which halves magic needed. So you go from 80 to 40, which is mitigated, or you can get an Economizer, which allows you to use spells for 1 MP cost. And you give somebody that, and the game's pretty much over. Anytime any sort of difficulty is over, it's gone at that point, you know. And I think there's only one you can find in the game, but you can mod your file and add economizers for everybody and just breeze through the game, and that would be fine. Now, one thing that I do like and dislike with Final Fantasy VI is that there are a lot of missables and one-time weapons, such as you only get one weapon, one of an item, and throughout the entire game. And there's a place called the Coliseum where you could bet items, and if you win the battle, you can get an improved item. And you can bet these single-time collecting items to get another, better single-time collecting item, which you have to weigh the choices there. However, I would say that this game is remiss in not having a New Game Plus feature, because the World of Ruin has so much stuff and optional. Almost everything, a single thing after getting the airship is optional. It's recommended, but it's optional. You could skip all of it and fly directly to Kefka's Tower, and if you had grinded Celis, Edgar, and Setzer up enough, you could probably beat the game as soon as you get the airship again in the World of Ruin, and skip every single other piece of content. And you'd probably get a different ending, you know, with only those 3 being collected and everybody else is gone. Terra probably shows up at the end, I think, because she's needed. She's the main character. But everybody else doesn't really need to be there. None of them do. And I think New Game Plus feature would have been great for that. If you beat the game and you get to keep all of your items and gold. Maybe reset the levels. That would be the one thing that I would concession with secede or whatever, is that reset the levels back to level 1, but you get to keep all of your weapons and items in one-time collecting things so that you could eventually replay it again and bet some more one-time items by collecting another one-time item so that you have 2 of them, so that you can bet one of the 2 to get another one, etc., etc., etc. I think that would have been a great idea to implement, because Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger released close to the same time, and Chrono Trigger had a New Game Plus feature on the Super Nintendo, but Final Fantasy VI did not. It needs one. It really would improve with a New Game Plus feature. It's just such a great game to have New Game Plus in it, so not having it is a big downside to me. Now, another improvement is the graphics, of course. Final Fantasy V to Final Fantasy VI, the sprite work has been incredibly upgraded. The detail to every single character, you get to see all sorts of new sprite models and emotions on display. So that's all a colossal improvement. The world map looks great on both the World of Balance and the World of Ruin. All of the designs and areas. I love Zozo especially, even though Zozo looks funny. Jador and Zozo. Zozo's supposed to be the ghetto, and yet Zozo seems to have the skyscrapers. You know, Zozo sounds like a downtown metropolis with all sorts of skyscrapers. A Gotham City full of crime and all that stuff, sure, but it's the one that looks the most advanced compared to Jador, which only looks like a basic town. Zozo's the most unique looking place, even though it's not necessarily a town, it's an actual dungeon. You see, there's no amenities there, even though you see a sign that says inn. The person at the counter doesn't actually let you stay at the inn. It's whatever. But Zozo is a great place. I love all the areas that you can go to, all the towns. There are some problems with some of the towns, though, and that they're towns. There's not really much to do in most of these towns. There are 3 towns on the Imperial continent, and there's not too much that happens in most of these. Miranda has the pigeon thing, where there's a carrier pigeon from a place called Moblis, another town, that has an injured soldier who has a girlfriend in Miranda, and he's been sending carrier pigeons to send messages to let her know that he's alright. And you can do that side quest for the girlfriend so that she gets to know her boyfriend's alright. But in the World of Ruin, the boyfriend dies, and Cyan's been the one who's continuing all of these correspondences. And that's a pretty good and heartfelt side quest for Cyan. It's too bad it didn't go anywhere. But, what else? Tzen, T-Z-E-N, Zen, is the northernmost town on the Imperial continent, and we get to learn a lot about a backstory there. There was a royal family in Zen. Zen used to be a kingdom, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It's just a single line of dialogue from a single NPC, so it's very missable backstory. And we'll get to the backstory and a lot of these things and how you could have expanded upon a lot of this stuff, especially Sen. Sen is a very interesting thing with the royal family thing that I think you could have added a playable character with that. We're going to get to that. Then there's another one that I can't remember the 3rd town on the Imperial Continent's name, but Vector's the capital, and the Vector's fine. I don't have any problems with Vector, but the 3 towns, they're interchangeable. You could have added a pigeon house to Sen, and you could have gotten rid of Miranda entirely. You could have added everything in Sen into the 3rd and final town, and you'd only need 1 town. There's a lot of redundancies, and they added a lot of towns just so that there'd be like pit stops while you're walking around. That feels to be like the only reason they're there is to be a pit stop to rest it in, buy materials, and then save your game outside. And it seems to be the only reason most of these places exist, and that's very disappointing to me, because I think you could have added some story to most of these places to make them stand out a little bit more. Some of them do have stuff to stand out. I'm going to say that again. Some of them do have story to stand out. Kohlingen, in the northwesternmost part of the map, that town is where Locke is from. Locke is one of your playable characters. Locke has a very deep backstory related to Kohlingen. Kohllingan, or something like that. But it's a pretty good one, so Kohlingen is safe. Sen is not safe. I think you could have added more to do with that one. Let's talk about the story, though. Enough about the towns. Let's talk about some of the story. The story in Final Fantasy VI, judging based off only this version, not future versions or future installments and all this stuff, even though this is a PS1 game disc, it's a Super Nintendo cartridge originally, or Super Famicom, so at most, the data you could put onto a Super Famicom and Super Nintendo, I believe, was about 2 megabytes, maybe 4, but definitely no more than 4, if 4. Probably around 2, actually, but it wasn't that much data, so you couldn't put too much in here. So for what we have, even though I do have some problems with the story, a lot of the characters do feel very basic, and some of them have no scenes at all outside of their introductory scenes, such as Umaro and Gogo. Umaro and Gogo are characters that you can pick up in the World of Ruin. Optional characters, obviously, so I understand that, but most of these characters in the World of Ruin were optional to begin with, but a lot of them were picked up in the World of Balance. Mog is probably optional, technically optional, so I get that's why he doesn't really have any story either, but it's just disappointing to me that a lot of these characters, Shadow, Gao, they don't really have too much. They have some, just enough to make them interesting, but not enough to really make them stand out, like Terra, Locke, Edgar, Sabin, Cyan, and Celis. Setzer barely gets in there. Strago and Realm are kind of in Shadow and Cyan's places. Shadow and Setzer's place. They don't really have too much, but they have enough to really separate them from the pack. But a lot of these characters don't really do too much to set them apart, but I get why. It's because we didn't really have much space. Although I will bring up a previous entry, I'm not bringing up future entries since they didn't exist at the time, but Final Fantasy IV, I think, did the party members and their personalities down a whole lot better, like, way better. They also spent more time with all of these characters. Every single character in your party at the time was meant to be there, so every cutscene that they were in, they had dialogue. They had a lot of dialogue. And the problem with Final Fantasy VI is that once you get access to the ability to swap party members, most of these guys end up being very, very basic. Some of them will say things, but most of them will not. If a character is required to be there, they will have a lot more dialogue. If a character is not required to be there, then you'd be lucky if they get a single line of unique dialogue based to their character and their personality. Otherwise, you'll basically get a series of basic dialogue boxes with no character actually saying it, so you don't really know who's actually saying this stuff. It's just basic text to move the plot, but it's not really connected to that unique character and how they would say it, which is very disappointing. But I understand that this was basically the first time they really did this. Final Fantasy IV may have had a large roster, but it wasn't really until later entries that you got access to swapping party members out, and you only really ever got that after you got access to the moon. Like, the very end of the game. That was the only time you were able to swap party members out. I remember being able to do that in the PSP version. I don't think you could do that in the PS1 version, and you definitely could do it in the original version. But you definitely could in the PSP version, and future versions you could swap party members out. But that was after you got to the moon. The game was pretty much over by then. During the main portion of the game, everybody was very fleshed out, and I really liked it a lot more than Final Fantasy VI. I think Final Fantasy IV has a more streamlined story. It's on rails for sure, but the party members were all more fleshed out. They were colorful. You have to use your imagination and build the story and fill in a lot of the gaps for a lot of Final Fantasy VI's characters. And that might be fun for a lot of people who are very imaginative. And I had quite a lot of fun doing that when I was first playing. I built a whole story around Shadow, you know? But as I get older and I look at this from a new perspective, it's like, I get it. The audience is building the story. They're getting more engagement out of it, but why didn't you build the story? Why didn't you, the maker of the story, write the story? Why didn't you expand on things that were pretty basic? Again, I understand that for the Super Nintendo, you probably couldn't really do too much there, but by the PS1, you definitely could have expanded on a lot of dialogue. You could have written in tons of lines of dialogue. It's not like this is voice acted and you gotta get a voice actor back. This is text. You just have to go in and type text and code that in for a character saying it. You could have fixed quite a bit of this for the PS1 version, but they didn't. They didn't fix much of anything. It was very disappointing. Let's move on to music. Music in Final Fantasy VI is a mixed bag. But then again, a lot of the previous titles are also pretty mixed bags. I think the one with the most consistent good tracks that I like is probably Final Fantasy IV. I'm sorry, but Final Fantasy IV is probably my favorite of these first 6. It's just, I'm just being honest. Final Fantasy VI does have some good ones, though. It does have some of the best, actually. Some of them that sound so much better than a lot of sequels. 5, 7, 8, 9. Some of these tracks are really good, such as Dancing Mad and the opera theme with Marriage of Figaro. I think it's Marriage. No, it's not Marriage of Figaro. I'm thinking of Marriage of Figaro because there's a Figaro kingdom. What I forget their names, but the opera one was very, very good. The one with Salas having to be in it. That one was a very good theme. I really loved the Phantom Train one. That was a very good one. The Phantom Forest was pretty good. I liked the when you go into the trench, the underwater trench. That theme was pretty good. Narsh's theme, when you get to Narsh, that theme was pretty good. I'm probably gonna be making a few enemies here, but the Figaro Castle theme is probably the most aggravating theme I've ever heard. I'm not a big fan of it at all. I think the castle theme in Final Fantasy V, which is pretty annoying, is better than the Figaro theme. It's just so basic. I don't know if Uematsu was not as like passionate or as intrigued or as involved in a lot of these themes, but a lot of them were very basic in comparison to a lot of the themes we got from Final Fantasy IV, which really stand out to me. Edgar's theme, the Paladin theme, the Moon theme, Rydia's theme. There's so many good songs in Final Fantasy IV that I know I don't really know key terms and song names as strongly, but I can hear them in my head, and it's such a great game, Final Fantasy IV, that Final Fantasy VI's music, I feel like they should have made it better. It does have the best battle theme, I'll give you that one. Of the 5 that I've played of the Pixel era, this one does have the best battle theme. The basic battle theme is really good. I really, really, really like it. What else would I say? Battle of the Big Bridge on Final Fantasy V is probably the best boss battle theme, though. But Dancing Mad is probably the best final boss theme. It's better than a lot of future title themes. It's so good. It's so good. But there's a song, the theme, Terra's theme, plays during the world map theme. It's okay, but I got it. It gets to you. It gets on your nerves. The searching for friends theme in the world of ruin, that gets on your nerves in ways that the world map themes in future titles and in some of the previous titles do a whole lot better. This one's probably one of my least liked world map themes. Even though I like the Searching for Friends song and Terra's theme, I like them. I don't like them enough to have them looped over and over and over and over and over. I don't like them enough for that. I think you should have had an overworld theme separate from Terra's theme, an overworld theme separate from Searching for Friends. I think so. You should have had one dedicated just to that, but they didn't, so oh well. Now let's go talk about the characters one by one. We're going to start with the main character, arguably, which is Terra. Terra is the best rounded out character. She has a lot of unique lines of dialogue. I have no problems with her. In battle, I have no problems with her. With stats, I have no problems with her. She is the most well-rounded. She can be used as a mage. She can be used as physical fighter. She can be used as pretty much anything you built her to be. Her special ability is Morph. You don't really get access to that until pretty late in the game, but Morph basically doubles her damage output and for a short period of time. It's basically like Zidane Trance in Final Fantasy IX. It's very good. Locke, typical thief. During the world of balance, he's basically used to use the steal skill to grab things from people, but for the most part, he doesn't really do too much damage. Give him daggers and give him the front row, he'll do some damage, but he'll take a lot of damage too. So I'd just keep him in the back row and have him steal during the world of balance, and during the world of ruin, give him some boomerangs or something, and he'll do some decent damage from the back row. I think it's called the Wild Hawk or something like that. You get two of them in the world of ruin, so you can give him two of them via the Genji glove, or you just give him one of them. He's fine. He's a very serviceable character to use in battle, and he's got one of the best stories. Locke is my favorite character in Final Fantasy VI. He is hands down one of my favorites. He does have a really good story in Kohlingen. He has a good story in the Phoenix Cave dungeon in the World of Ruin. He's good. Overall, he's a very solid character. Edgar is the third one on the list. He is the Dragoon Knight archetype. You can give him the relics to make him Dragoon. He's the best Dragoon you can make, other than Mog, who's also a really good Dragoon. Edgar can equip swords and spears, so if you want to make him a Dragoon, give him spears. If you want to make him a Knight, give him swords. He's got good defense, good HP. His magic's not that great, but he's got access to the Tools skill, and Tools is probably one of my favorite things. It's very useful in the world of balance. There's a lot of great stuff there. A couple of them are optional missables. Not really missable, but they're optional to pick up, such as the Air Anchor and the chainsaw. You have to go to dungeons to find those, but they're pretty good, they're pretty strong, and they do make him a very unique character that stands out from the entire cast. Any character that has a special ability that shows up on the skills list is very unique. Sabin is also unique in that he gets access to the Blitz ability. He's the monk class. He's like Yang from Final Fantasy IV. He's got access to the Blitz skill as his special ability. Every character has a special ability and magic. So the magic is universal for everybody, but their special ability is unique only to them, except for Coco, who could use every ability. Sabin's Blitz requires button code combinations. And thanks to a very handy glitch in the Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1 versions, you don't really need to put in the code to get it to work properly. For example, let me pull out my handy-dandy little pad of paper and my pen, and I'll write down one of the codes and tell you how it can work on the PlayStation version versus, say, the Game Boy Advance version or the Pixel Remaster version. Let's say a code is left up, a diagonal, both of them at the same time. So if I write a comma, that means that it's a single use. If I have two of them in between a comma, that means you have to press both of them at the same time, right? and then up, comma, then up, plus right, comma, and then right, comma, and then right, plus down, comma, plus down, comma, plus down, plus left, comma, and then left again. This is his bum rush code, right? That's his bum rush code. You can see all of the commas, which means that each one indicates its own separate input. Due to a glitch in the Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1 versions, a very handy thing happens in that every single one of these commas that you see 2 arrows instead of 1, you can press either one of them, and it'll work. For example, if you press left, left, up, up, right, right, down, down, and then left, you will be able to use the code bum rush and do the attack. In the Game Boy Advance version and in the Pixel remaster, I think they fixed this. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't played them, but I know that they did get changed in those later titles. Later ports, shall I say. But in the original version, due to a glitch, you can just press either one of these arrows and it will work. And it makes him a whole lot easier to use. I didn't know this until my second playthrough. I didn't know you could do this. So I was always trying to do these left, down at the same time, diagonal button pushes with the arrow, with the D-pad. But my controller would not register those 2 button presses. It would not register those diagonals, and I kept failing the blitzes, every single one of them. So I stuck with suplex. I just stuck with that one because it's just triangle, square, down, up. There's no diagonals in that one. That was the only one I was able to do easily without fail. So I did get to suplex the train. But Sabin is a very useful character. He's a very physical-minded character. You don't really need to give him any spells outside of buffs like, say, haste and slow. Anything like that doesn't really require magic stat to be high to do damage or to heal for more healing points. Those are things you can give to Sabin, and he'll be fine. Cyan is another interesting character, but he is probably the least useful in regards to his skills. Cyan operates as the samurai class, right? He operates as a samurai. He gets to equip samurai katanas. He's the only one who can equip katanas, which is pretty cool. But his sword skill, or Bushido skill, in the Super Nintendo and PS1 versions, require you to wait. There's a series of numbers of 1 to 8. If they're grayed out, he doesn't have access to those abilities. If they're whitened, he has access to those abilities. And you just have to sit there as the bar slowly fills up as you're waiting to be able to click. And if you press attack, which is the X button on the PlayStation 3, if you press attack during any of the numbers, he'll use a Bushido skill related to one of those numbers, which requires a whole lot of waiting on that little filler bar. And while that bar is filling up, enemies are attacking you. So it's very risky, and it's very pointless, because there are a bunch of other characters that you could use their special abilities without waiting for them to happen like this, which means he is probably one of the least useful characters, though he is one of the most beloved characters plot-wise. I want to make that distinction. And I also want to make another distinction. Yoshitaka Amano, I think that's his name, who drew all the art, like this one. He drew Cyan, and the way Cyan looks, to me, being a Dragon Ball fan, obviously, see my Dragon Ball review series on this channel. I have a lot of Dragon Ball stuff that I love to talk about. Cyan looks exactly like Tao Pai Pai. You can look that up. That's Taopai. If you want to look that up, he looks exactly like Tao Pai Pai. So whenever Cyan was talking, I imagined Tao Pai Pai's voice coming out of Cyan's mouth, and it was fantastic. I loved it. Cyan is a great character plot-wise, but in gameplay-wise, he's probably one of the least useful. And he was a character that I honestly, genuinely debated between him and the Yeti, bringing him to Kefka's Tower. Yeah, ultimately, I decided on Cyan because he did have access to magic. so he could use haste too and things like that to at least mitigate and make himself useful. So there's that. Shadow is up next. Shadow's story is mostly told in inns. What does that mean? Well, when you take Shadow to an inn and you sleep there the night, you'll have a chance, I think it's like a 50% chance, of seeing a cutscene. I don't know how many, like maybe up to 8, but you get to see dreams from Shadow's perspective, where you get to see a guy named, I forget his name. I'm terrible with names. Doyle. It's Dalton or something. It's a very basic name, and he's with a friend, another fellow thief friend, and they're off doing their adventures, and he has to leave a thief behind because he's gotten injured. So Shadow leaves the guy behind, and this hardens his heart and makes him put on his mask as Shadow and all this other stuff. So that's all the story you really get for him. During the main game, he shows up occasionally to help out, but he'll have a percentage chance to leave after every battle. I think it's 1 out of 16 chance to leave after every single battle, which doesn't really make him useful in the world of balance. But if you want to have him, he's there. The only time when he's permanently in your party is during Sabin's storyline. At one point in the game, the characters split up. Terra, Locke, and Sabin. They split up. And you get to pick each one to do a scenario for them until they reunite in Narsh. Sabin's scenario has him pick up Cyan, and then he can find Shadow hanging out. And Shadow will join him on a raid on the Doma Castle Imperial encampment. And if Shadow's still in your party, because you will have a chance to leave during every random battle until you get to the Phantom Train. If he's still with you by the time you reach the Phantom Train, he won't leave during the Phantom Train dungeon. After the Phantom Train, though, he will leave. So it's just a matter of how much you like him, how well he's used. His special ability is Throw. So if you have a lot of Gil to burn, Gil is the in-game currency name, Gil. If you have a lot of Gil to burn, you can buy a bunch of ninja scrolls for Shadow to throw, and he'll become a very powerful character that way. Otherwise, he's about as useful as Locke without the skill, the steal skill. He's got similar stats to Locke, but he does have throw, so if you have stuff to throw him and he'll be fine. Gao, that's up next. Gao. I call him Gao. It's G-A-U. People love Gao. They think he's the best character in the game, Final Fantasy VI fanatics. I'm not a Final Fantasy VI fanatic, obviously, but I am a Final Fantasy VI fan. But Gao, at least for the PlayStation 1 version, he's just not worth it. For the PC version, maybe he will be far more worth it. For the Game Boy Advance version, maybe he will be far more worth it in future versions, Pixel Remaster, all that stuff. Gao might be a lot more easier to use thanks to save states. Because the way Gao gets stronger is by collecting rages. The Veld is where he collects rages. Every monster grouping, every single encounter you have ever encountered throughout the entire map, every dungeon, every world map area, every possible encounter you could possibly have, most of them, outside of some bosses, will show up on the Veld. Which means there's a lot. There's over 250 monsters individually in the game, but there are, well over 1,000 groupings of monsters in the game. So you will have... Well, no, I don't think it's well over 1,000, but it's definitely more than 250, probably about 800-ish, maybe. You have groupings of about 50 groupings, packs, 64 packs. So every 64 random battles, it will cycle through every 64 packs of enemies. And in each pack, there are about 10, maybe 8 to 10 random encounters, random groupings of enemies. So every time you get into 64 battles, you have a 1 in 8 or 1 in 10 chance to encounter one of the packs, one of the enemy groups in that pack. Which means if you want to encounter every single one, provided the game is playing along to your wishes and you only encounter one group at a time, which means after you've encountered something, you won't encounter it again. You will have to cycle through all 64 packs at least 8 times, maybe 10 times, to get every single possible encounter. And to get every single possible rage, you will need to do at least maybe 500 of them. I don't know, but you need to get all of the rages to complete Gao's rage list. And the play time, the amount of time, the grinding needed for this. This is one of the reasons I quit playing Final Fantasy VI the first time around, is because I got absolutely sick of doing this. I have the completionist brain, to complete all of these lists, to collect every single rage, to get every single thing. That's one of the reasons I got burned out in Pokemon. I absolutely hate that franchise now. But it's because I wanted to get everything. I wanted to get all of the things. I wanted to get all the Pokemon. But it took too long. It was so friggin' long that I just got fed up with it. I got burned out. So I didn't get nearly as many this time around as I got last time, because I just got sick of using Gao. He's very useful, though. His rage ability, his leap ability, I'll talk about how they work. On the Veldt, Gao will have access to the leap ability. When you use leap, Gao will leave your party and leap upon a group of enemies. And any enemies on that screen, he will learn their rages. Now, what is a rage? Let's say for Behemoth. If he leaps on a Behemoth, when you use that Behemoth's rage, you will have access to all of the perks and buffs that that Behemoth has, and all of the weaknesses that that Behemoth has as well. And the Behemoth's special skill, which is Meteor, Gao will be able to use Meteor without MP cost, which is very useful. Very, very useful, especially if you're trying to conserve MP. You can find and encounter various enemies on the Veldt that you have encountered throughout the game that will make Gao into one of the most useful characters in the games. For example, encountering a magic pot in the cultist's tower, and you have Gao leap on a magic pot. And then every other turn, Gao will cast Curaga or Cure 3 on the entire party, pretty much healing them for max HP every single time, which is very, very useful. But it's not every turn, it's every other turn. He has a percentage chance to use the special ability, and whenever he doesn't, he'll just attack normally. And he's unarmed, his damage is usually garbage when he attacks normally, so it's... And he also is not controllable when he uses a rage. He basically goes into a berserk state. So you have to keep track of all of these things. You have to keep track of the buffs, you have to keep track of the debuffs, you have to keep track of the special abilities of every single rage monster that you encounter. It's a lot. And unfortunately for the PS1 version, these are not alphabetical order. So you, well, every single other battle you encounter on the Veldt, and you go, do I have that rage? Do I have that? So you have to click and open your rage menu. You have to scroll through every single line, every single number, because they're not in alphabetical order, so you have no idea where this monster's name's going to be. So you scroll through all of it and see if you have it or not. And if you don't, he leaps. If he does, then you just win the battle and move on. It's very annoying. It's very tedious. I hate it. Some people love Gao. They love him. I hate it. It's just, I hate it. I hate the Veldt. I hate the random number generator with the 64 packs. I hate it. I honestly think you could have had maybe a big cave system, 8 floors, 8 to 10 floors, and you could still have your 64 packs, but every 64 battles is a fixed encounter. So you do 64 battles on all 8 to 10 floors, and you get everybody. It confirmed. No random generator chance. No chance. It's just confirmed encounter. I would have preferred that. It would have taken a whole lot less time. because this is way too time consuming. Even with your save states and the PC and all that stuff, there's a lot of chance you're going to be resetting it so many times. It's annoying. It's way too annoying for me. The rages are way too annoying for me. Gao was way too annoying for me to use. But he's a good character, personality-wise. He's very fun. He's funny. Any lines of dialogue you'll get out of him is probably going to elicit a laugh. His father's pretty funny. You're going to have a cutscene with that in the World of Ruin. It's very fun. He's a very fun character. He's just not for me. I wouldn't say he's a bad character. He's just very tedious. Very tedious. And it's now come to my attention that this is probably going to go over an hour, so sorry about that. Up next is Celis. Celis works a lot like Terra. She's Terra 2.0, but instead of access to the Morph skill, she has access to the Runic skill. Runic basically has her hold up a sword and allows it to absorb any magical attack, so she doesn't take damage that turn, which is very, very helpful. If an enemy has access to Ultima, and that enemy uses Ultima, Runic will probably absorb that and she won't take damage. Everybody else may die, but she will survive. It's a very useful ability, but the amount of times when you get to use it for its usefulness are very few. So most of the time, it's basically a pointless thing that's just taking up space on her menu list. She's basically good for magic mostly, but she could do physical attacks like Terra if you build her up like that. She is pretty much the main character for the World of Ruin section, at least until you pick up Setzer. After that, she's basic bland again. Speaking of Setzer, Setzer is probably my second favorite character in the game, and he's probably also just as useless as Locke in the World of Ruin until you get a very specific weapon for him that makes him useful. And that weapon, unfortunately, is in the final dungeon of the game. So you're going to have to raid the final dungeon to find the fixed dice. Once you get Setzer the fixed dice, he will become OP as heck. He will be awesome. He will be fantastic. Setzer's unique ability is Slot. And I hate it. I hate it because I hate slots. I don't like chance-based things like this. I just don't. I'm not a chance-based person. I'm just not. I like certainties. I don't like chance. So, Slot basically lets you roll a slot. Depending upon what you roll, he'll do an attack, or he'll do a garbage attack, like the Mugu, whatever. For example, if you get a 7, you get a bar, and you get a Chocobo, he'll do a Mugu, which doesn't really do much of anything. It doesn't do anything. But if you get a 777, you'll get Joker Death, which will kill everything on the screen if it's killable by death. Strago's up next. Strago's one of my favorite characters, too. He's probably my third favorite character this time around. He's just an old guy. He has access to lore. And lore lets him learn enemy skills. He's a lot like Gao, but just more better. I think you could have gotten rid of Gao altogether and just made Strago the Gao, and basically have him learn enemy skills as he's attacked by them and not have to worry about the frickin' felt. And he would have been far more better of a character. He would have been far superior, far superior to Gao in every single way, shape, and form, because you could just go into the lore menu, click an ability, and use it, instead of having to click a rage and then have him go into a berserker state. I think Strago is one of the better characters here. Although, once you have access to Ultima, every single one of his lores are useless, except for maybe Bad Breath and Big Guard, which are very good and useful abilities, especially if you give him the Gold Needle or the Economizer to have 1 MP cost. If he has 1 MP cost, he is basically unstoppable. Up next is his granddaughter, Realm. Realm is pretty much only there to help Strago learn lores. Otherwise, her ability, which is Sketch, and if you give her a certain relic, that Sketch ability turns into Control. Realm is basically like a Beast Tamer type of character, that basic Beast Tamer class from Final Fantasy V. They added that to her, and it's not that great. It really isn't. Control is basically taking control of an enemy and getting access to their list of abilities so that you can basically 100% of the time confirmed get that ability to be cast so that Strago can learn it. Because Strongbow can only learn an ability if it's used in battle by the enemy. So after you've collected all of the lores that you want Strongbow to learn, Realm basically becomes a mage. She has no other purpose. Her weapons that she can equip, like brushes, they're pointless, they're garbage. But she does have the highest base magic attack stat in the game. The highest base magic. Which means if you give her Ultima and an Economizer, she will be dealing 9999s to everything that moves. She is unstoppable with that setup. I would definitely give her that. Up next is Mog. Mog is basically a less useful Edgar, but because Mog has the access to the Dragoon stuff, and Mog can equip spears, which is very good. And Mog also has access to dances. The only reason I don't really like dances all that much is because once you click a dance, it is perpetual. You lose control of Mog. It's like a berserk state. So if you ever had a team of Gao, Mog, and Umaro, and you had Mog use dance, and then all three will be berserk, and you won't have control over them. I like having control over my characters and their abilities and what they choose to do in battle. So the dances, while pretty good, depending upon who you're fighting, they are very limited in their usefulness. So you're probably just going to make Mog a Dragoon, give Mog the 2 Dragoon relics, and let him go from that. As for Umaro, Umaro is basically a berserker character. He has the highest physical attack stat in the game, but his defenses are garbage. He's going to be taking damage up the wazoo. You're going to be healing him all the time. But he will be dealing the highest physical damage out of your entire party without the best weapons in the game. If you give the best weapons in the game to somebody, they'll probably be out-damaging Umaro pretty easily. Probably double damage. The fixed dice for Setzer can have him do 9999 max damage depending upon what he rolls. So even if his level is level 1, and you use fixed dice, he can still potentially do 9999 damage. It's fixed. It depends. It ignores enemy defense. It ignores the barriers. It ignores everything. It's very good. So Setzer with the fixed dice is far more reliable than Umaro is. But I like Umaro. Umaro's good to bring to, say, the Colosseum, because he's already berserked and you know what he's going to do. So he basically hits people physically for high physical damage. So if you want to bring him to the Colosseum for some Colosseum fights, he'll be fine there. Personally, I prefer Setzer with the fixed dice and an offering and a Genji glove. Because here's the thing with the offering and Genji glove relics. Both of them half your attack. So, like, for example, Genji gloves lets you dual-wield weapons, so you get to attack twice, but each attack is like half damage. Or 75% damage, rather, for the Genji glove. And for the offering, you get to attack 4 times with a single weapon, up to 8 times with a Genji glove equipped. But when you equip an offering, your damage is 50%. You would get to attack 4 times, so technically it's twice as the damage, but it is randomized upon a mob of enemies. Instead of 4 hits on a single character, it's 4 hits on a mob of characters for 50% damage. Setzer, with the offering and the Genji glove, will have 8 attacks, and it ignores those damage modifiers, because it's all about RNG for Setzer. So he could still do his 9999s all 8 times if you want. It just depends on what the dice roll onto. So he is so broken in the Colosseum. If he gets one single turn to use the basic attack, it's over. So I'd bring him for the Colosseum over Umaro. He's just the better character. And lastly, but not leastly, Gogo. I do have to mention for Umaro cannot equip Espers, so Umaro's stats cannot be upgraded upon level up. Same for Gogo. Gogo cannot equip Espers, so Gogo's level stats cannot go up when he levels up. The only thing that goes up when you level up is your magic pool, magic points, and health points. Everything else does not go up. Stats do not go up in this game. That's kind of annoying to me, personally. It really makes your equipment far more important. than otherwise, you know. Go-Go is a mime. Go-Go can equip any skill that any other character has, such as lore, such as Bushido sword skills, such as Blitz, such as Rage. Go-Go could do all of it. When you give Go-Go magic, Go-Go will have all of the spells in the combined total of the 3 characters in his current party. So, if you go to tackle Kefka's tower and you only gave Strago every spell in the game, but Go-Go is not in Strago's party, then Go-Go will not have access to every spell in the game. Even though a character you have has access to every spell in the game, Go-Go's spells, when you give him magic, only have what the characters in your current party with him have. So keep that in mind. But he is very useful in that he can use Blitz. Bum Rush does a lot of damage with Go-Go. Not as much as Sabin, but it does quite a bit. Go-Go is basically that guy that does everything everybody else can do, just not as well. His stats are very poor. They're very low. But with the right equipment setup, his magic can go up to 35 to 40, which is pretty decent. He'll produce some pretty decent damage. It's higher than Edgar's and Sabin's. So if you gave him that, he'll be pretty good. And I took Go-Go over Gao into the Kefka's tower. I left Umaro and Go-Go. I left Umaro and Gao on the airship. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about all of that stuff. I'm almost done. I know most people aren't even at. I know most people haven't listened or watched half of this. All right, you just don't have the time, or you just don't care. I understand, but I care. That's why I'm talking about it. Up next, we're going to be talking about the villain. This is probably where people's love for this game comes in. Kefka is easily one of the top 3 best villains in this entire franchise. He is so memorable, so funny. He is so evil and dastardly. He eclipses and outshines who you thought was the main villain, Emperor of Gestalt. But Kefka is the true big baddie, and he is a delightful character in the world of balance. He is so much fun. There's so many cutscenes skipping to him, and you get to see so much stuff with him. But I do have some gripes that I want to mention. During the World of Ruin, you don't see much of Kefka at all. None. And I kind of wish we could see some cutscenes of him, as maybe he's monitoring your heroes or sending goons or villains after them as you're exploring the world map, firing spells at them, destroying cities and all of that stuff. I would have preferred to see some stuff from Kefka during the World of Ruin. We see nothing of him, which is something that really impacts the pacing of the World of Ruin, in that you could spend 10 to 20 hours exploring everything in the World of Ruin, doing everything in the World of Ruin, getting all the espers, mastering all the spells, going to every town, collecting every character, and you don't see a single sign of Kefka, not a single cutscene with him. It's pretty disappointing. But he's still memorable enough in the world of balance for me to say he's one of the top 3 best villains in this entire franchise. I do like Kefka as a character. He's one of the best. I think I've already mentioned this next bullet point. Problems with the big roster. There are dialogue issues when you're switching party members. Later entries in the Final Fantasy VI ports do fix something, so let's talk about that. The PS1 version uses the Super Nintendo's dialogue boxes. It uses that game's version of the dialogue boxes, which sometimes can basically look like this. Let's pull out our handy-dandy piece of paper and pull out our handy-dandy little pen here. We're going to pull that out and have a dialogue box. We're going to write our own dialogue box, basically, okay? So here's how that looks. We're going to say, Edgar. What? He just says, what? with a little exclamation point, right? And then right below that, we'll say cyan. Just say the enemy approaches. That would be in a single line of dialogue, right? That would be in a single box. Two characters saying the exact same thing, separated only by their name and this. And the name isn't even bold text. It's in the same. It's in the same thing. And I didn't really like that. I thought that with the PlayStation 1 release, you could have at least fixed the dialogue boxes and made every single individual character's line of dialogue have its own dialogue box. Maybe even add their character portrait next to it. I think Final Fantasy IV on the PS1 did this better than Final Fantasy VI. I think. I'm not too sure. My memory's a bit fuzzy because I remember playing the PSP version of Final Fantasy IV far more than the PS1 of Final Fantasy IV. But I have played both. But hey, Final Fantasy IV is just my favorite one of the pixel era, so I'm probably just showing bias here. But I don't like the way this looks, and it happens a lot. And if your eyes aren't very good, if you're standing back, you're sitting back looking at TV far away, and there's a lot of text, sometimes the words mold together and you forget who's saying what, because the multiple people have lines of dialogue in the same text box, and that's a big problem for me. I think you could have fixed that in the PS1 version. Another thing that I would do. This is still probably one of the last bullet points. Let me think. Let me see. No, there's three or four more bullet points left. But this one is what I would do differently for the final area, the World of Ruin, and the Kefka's Tower. For example, in Kefka's Tower, you have 14 characters total. You can make 3 teams with 4 characters each, which means 2 people stay on the airship when you explore this entire dungeon. When you make it to the absolute tippy top of the dungeon, the 2 people you left on the airship somehow show up. They're there. They just show up. You didn't use them during the dungeon, but the story implies that they joined you climbing the tower. And I think that is very poor, very poor game design. I think if you added 2 characters and made Sabin mandatory to pick up during Celis's trek through the World of Ruin, she picks up Sabin, Edgar, and Setzer has a team of 4. So when you get the airship, you'll mandatorily have a team of 4. And in the original version, we have 3 that you have mandatory: Celis, Edgar, and Setzer. These are the only 3 that you need to pick up to beat the game. You don't really need to get anybody else. They're not required. You can go to Kefka's Tower and make a team of Celis in one team, Edgar in the second team, and Setzer in the third team, and you can complete the dungeon with them if they're leveled up enough, which is doable. It's very doable. It's going to be difficult, but it's very doable. I wouldn't recommend it, though. There are a lot of characters that can use instant death on you, and so if they use instant death and you get hit with it, you're gone. So, but hey, I would add 2 extra characters. If you added 2 extra characters, that brings our total to 16, which means you can make 4 teams of 4 characters. Everybody gets to join this dungeon. Everybody gets to go to the top, so that when we make it to the tippy top, everybody's there, and it makes sense why everybody's there, rather than the 2 you left on the airship somehow showing up to for no reason. And who are these 2 characters? I've already created them. I've already created ideas for them. One of them, a hunter. In Final Fantasy V, we had a hunter class, and I think that was missing in this. So combine the hunter with the bard skills sing. Maybe make him the Prince of Sen, Tzen, that northern city, that northern town on the Imperial continent. that had a royal family that the Empire killed, that an NPC says, maybe we could expand on that story a little bit. Maybe we can expand on that royal family and say that this prince is the only one who survived the death of his family, and he's been living out in the forests with the animals. And you go find him, and he joins you in the raid on the Imperial capital. And that would be a great addition. He would be a great addition. Maybe give him sing skills, and he doubles as a bard. Unlike Mog, whose dances last the whole battle, and you kind of lose control of him once you click a dance. When the prince uses a sing skill, it only lasts for that turn, and you get to use the prince for the next turn for something else. I'd add him as a character. And then the second character that I would add would be a swordsman who wields two-handed swords. Now, you can equip a sword in two hands using the Gauntlet relic. I would add a new line of weapons called two-handed swords that only this character can equip. And maybe with a relic, you can let him equip one-handed swords and shields so that he can get any bonuses with a shield if you need him to have one. His backstory could be that he is General Leo's rival. He's the self-proclaimed nemesis of General Leo, and maybe also a childhood friend. He joins you in Miranda thinking that if he raids the capital with you, he'll meet General Leo and get to fight him. His special skill is swordcraft. He can learn up to 8 swordcraft abilities, and he can only learn a new one by equipping one of the 8 equipable two-handed swords in the game. Each swordcraft has an invisible counter that he needs to keep the weapon equipped until he masters the skill. If he doesn't master the skill and you equip a second sword, he loses access to that swordcraft ability. So, that's one idea. I'd probably just make it that you don't need the invisible counter, the ability is only tied to the weapon. That way, it kind of makes a good progression, because these swordcraft abilities that I typed up here on this little WordPad document do look pretty OP. By the World of Ruin, he can go to General Leo's grave in Thamasa and take Leo's sword. And equipping Leo's sword, which becomes a two-handed sword, he learns Shock as his final swordcraft. I do think that would be a good character. I think both of them would be great characters to expand the story and add to 16 total playable characters so that everybody gets to join Kefka's Tower raid. Because it really bothers me that 2 stay behind and they join you at the top for no reason. It really bothers me. It does. It bothers me. I don't like it. I'd like to have everybody there. So adding those 2 would fix that. Let's go down to the final. Oh, this is the final bullet point. Wow, okay. Espers and Esper grinding. I have a problem with some of these. Most Espers that you can equip do not have a stat boost when you level up. They'll have magic spells that you can learn for the character, but they don't have a stat boost. And I think that every single Esper should have a stat boost of some kind upon level up. And there's a problem with Odin. Odin is one of the Espers that you can collect in the World of Ruin, and he is the only Esper that offers the Speed Plus upon level up. You lose access to Odin if you get the Raiden Esper. And the Raiden Esper has unique skills that Odin does not offer. Raiden gets you access to the Quick ability. The Quick spell, which I think lets you double cast magic or something. Odin gives you access to the Meteor spell, and I think something else, but another Esper called Crusader also gives you access to Meteor, so you don't really lose any spells by losing Odin, but you do lose the Speed Plus on a character, and it may be very important to give speed stat increases to some of these guys, especially Cyan and Strago, who are very slow. Giving them speed boosts upon level up really helps them out. So I think the fix here would be to keep Odin and get Raiden, or to add stat boosts to every single Esper and have one of them add a speed boost as well as Odin, so that you still have a speed boosting Esper when you lose Odin. That's the final bullet point on this thing. I have been talking for over an hour. This is almost a feature-length discussion of Final Fantasy VI. It's crazy. I didn't think I'd be discussing this for this long, but that just goes to show you just how big of a game this was. This was the game for the Super Nintendo. This was the game to get. It was the biggest thing on that thing. Go back and play Super Nintendo games. Go back and play most of them. Very few will ever come even close. Not even Lufia 2 will come even close to Final Fantasy VI in terms of its sheer scale, content, playtime. There is so much in that game. It is incredible that they were able to do all of that into a Super Nintendo cartridge. It's very fascinating to me. It's Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger are like the two Super Nintendo games that you cannot miss when you're playing video games. If you're or RPG fan, they're like the two games that you have to play. They're like the two that you have to add to your collection. They're the two that you have to get. So I did get them. I got them both. Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, played them both. I like Chrono Trigger more. In conclusion, Final Fantasy VI was a major mixed bag for me. Some of the things that it does well, it does the best out of the entire Pixel era. A lot of the things that it does well, it does the best. Some of the things that it does poorly make Final Fantasy IV the better game, even though Final Fantasy VI offers more things. There are far more things. Final Fantasy IV is the most streamlined RPG. It's got the best story. It has the best characters. They're all more well-rounded because every character is meant to be there at any point in the story. Which means that they wrote dialogue for all of the characters at every single point in the story. Which means that no matter where you are, if that character is with you, that character was meant to be with you, and they will have a lot of dialogue while they are with you. I like that. I like to have character growth. I like to see the story. I like to see how everything plays out with everybody. Do I think there are scenes in Final Fantasy VI that are far superior to Final Fantasy IV that have a lot of great character building moments, many of which are optional? Yes. There's a scene in Figaro Castle that you could see pretty early on. If you stay at the inn in Figaro Castle while Edgar and Sabin are in your party, you will see one of the best cutscenes the game has to offer. When you take Cyan to Doma Castle in the World of Ruin and go through one of the longest series of dungeons, you will get one of the most emotionally impactful scenes in the entire game. Probably one of the most impactful and emotional scenes of all the Pixel era games. It's a good game. I wouldn't call it my favorite. Final Fantasy IV is probably my favorite of the Pixel era. I know I'm speaking from bias. I played it first before Final Fantasy VI, and it had a PSP remaster, unlike Final Fantasy VI, and the complete collection on the PSP is the definitive Final Fantasy to me. There's so much to do in that. I loved that game to pieces. Final Fantasy VI has a lot to offer, but it tries to do too much, too fast, and it ends up being a little bit messy. Future ports fix a lot of the problems that I have, such as the problem with Cyan. I believe the Pixel remaster lets you pick the the swordsmanship, the Bushido skills from a list of abilities. You get to pick which one you want, and then you get the cooldown, while you get to control the other characters during the battle. That is far better utilized. I don't know why they didn't do that from the start. Maybe they didn't have the ability or didn't know how to do it when they first made that. But I'm glad that it exists in the Pixel Remaster. I'm glad a lot of the problems that I have with a lot of these characters got fixed in the Pixel Remasters. So if I were to tell you which version to play, it would not be the PS1 version, unless we went back in time to when this game first released. I would say if you don't have a Super Nintendo and you have a PlayStation, get this. But we're not back in time, are we? We're in 2025. So, play the Pixel Remaster of Final Fantasy VI. It's far superior to this version. It's a far better experience. And it might even be better than Final Fantasy IV in the Pixel Remaster version. I just haven't played the Pixel Remaster of 6 to confirm that, because I have played the remaster of Final Fantasy IV on PSP, and I absolutely love everything about it. It's one of the best games in the Pixel era. But yeah, that's my conclusion. Final Fantasy VI is a very, very good game. I spent most of this time talking about critical things. I wanted to be critical about Final Fantasy VI because everybody else praises the absolute heck out of it, and I agree with almost all of their praise. I do. I think Final Fantasy VI is one of the best RPGs ever made, but they have problems, and I wanted to point them out. I did want to point out them so that people are aware, that there's a lot of this stuff here that maybe could have been done a little better, but I'm glad that Final Fantasy exists, and I'm glad the future titles fixed a lot of problems that 6 had. Although some future titles also messed things up. My favorite Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy IX. I'm gonna have to talk about that one someday. But there we go. That's it. I don't know how to end these things. This is Final Fantasy VI. Signing off.